Story 1. Background: I live in rural northern Alberta, Canada. It's a small community where everyone knows everyone, and neighbors are neighborly, or so I thought. I also want to say that I am a dog owner and absolutely adore animals. But 3 dogs, all large breeds, always barking non-stop at everyone and everything, is a bit much. I cannot walk into my backyard without 20-30 minutes of non-stop barking. Then they pause for a bit and right back at it again. There is a skate park across the street, and they bark constantly at the kids playing. People walking past on the street non-stop barking. Of the 3 dogs, there is one that causes me a lot more concern than just barking. He aggressively runs towards the fence, growling, barking, and the hair on the back of his neck is raised, ears pinned back. I believe there are no bad dogs, only bad owners. I would have talked to my neighbor about this, however, I do not like confrontation and like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Also, I should mention he is an MT, emergency medical technicians, and I would assume works the night shift sometimes. This makes it hard to find time to talk about the problem and find a solution like good neighbors, and I didn't think it's appropriate to run out the house saying, "Excuse me," like a crazy Karen when I see him coming home from work. So today's incident that caused me to phone the town bylaw office about him and his dogs and disgusting yard is when the yard was covered in a thick layer of dog poop, as they never clean it up, and there is tons of garbage everywhere. I was in my yard grabbing a pot from the corner of my yard, and that's when his black aggressive dog came barreling towards the fence, growling, barking, and his hackles were up. He came so fast and hard he nearly scared me half to death. Normally I would ignore him and go about my business. However, when I look up, there is my neighbor. So I asked him if he could do something about his dogs, as they are very loud and constantly barking. Keep in mind, I have to practically scream at him because all 3 dogs are barking now and he is not close. He says he doesn't know what to do, shrugging his shoulders like it's not a big deal. I explained that it's too much and that a certain dog is kind of aggressive. He says that dogs bark and he is only a puppy and wants to play. A 2-3-year-old dog is not a puppy, and I wasn't feeling the I wanna play vibe. I asked if he worked nights and explained that he is not the only one in the neighborhood who works nights. People cannot sleep with endless pointless barking. He shrugs again and says, "What am I supposed to do?" At this point, I am at a loss for words. Keep in mind, the dogs have not stopped barking this entire time, and yes, I still have to yell over them. I asked if he could make them stop so we could talk, and he said, "What am I supposed to do?" I said, "Okay, at least I tried." I walked in my house and proceeded to call my town's office to get in touch with the bylaw office. The lady that called me back was super nice and extremely helpful. She agreed with me and says it will change today, and if not, then he will receive fines and so on. I have to admit, it has been the quietest afternoon in a long time. I haven't seen or heard from the dogs or my neighbor. I mean, how entitled can you be to think that you are the only person who lives in the neighborhood and that you don't have to clean up after your dogs or control their behavior? Story 2. Sorry, I'm not sure how the update system works. I'm still pretty new to Reddit. But I wanted to post an update about my struggles with Jake trying to effectively sabotage my job in the bakery. What happened here happened just a couple of days ago. I got in contact with the owner, who is an extremely chill guy. I've known him for around 6 years since he took over. Not sure who he took over from or why. The last guy was kind of reclusive. He had me meet him out for a coffee and chat away from the bakery to tell him everything. I told him about the struggles we've had with Jake, how he's been harassing the bakers, how he's constantly using his phone in spite of the rules, and especially about how he won't stop trying to do my job. The owner, whom I'll call H, was very concerned and said he'd stop by this past Tuesday. He did, and Jake was there. In the 2 days since I'd spoken with the owner, Jake had not only continued to do my orders, he had also begun ordering inventory for me. By the time I realized this, it was too late, and we were going to be receiving about 20 boxes of white sheet cakes. Yay. So suffice to say, it was very satisfying watching H sidle through on Tuesday, while Jake was badly decorating one of my orders. I took advice from you all here in my last post and just let him do it. I sliced bread in the meantime and watched. H approached Jake and quite irritably asked what he was doing. Jake looked very confused, and I'm guessing he'd never met H during the hiring process. He explained incredulously that he was decorating a cake for a customer. H nodded and said, "I thought you were hired as a bakery assistant. I don't believe this is your job." Jake tried to explain that I was training him, to which I replied that I wasn't. H motioned me over and asked me to take him and Jake to the blast freezer. Inside the blast freezer, I'd saved everything from after my last post: 11 ruined cake orders, 4 bowls of wasted frosting, the entire rack of crumb-coated rounds, another rack of crumb-coated rounds in a different flavor, a random 4-tiered cake Jake had made during one of my days off, and a whole stack of 12 packs of childishly decorated, sloppy cupcakes. I told the owner that all of this was done by Jake, and Jake looked furious. "Why are these here? These were orders. You didn't give the customers their orders?" he snapped. I told him calmly that I'd remade the orders, because again, these looked horrible. H agreed and told Jake that these were far from passable and asked him what on earth he thought he was doing. Jake blurted out that he was working efficiently. H asked him why he'd needlessly coated all of the rounds, far more than I could use before they expired. Jake instead said to let him decorate them and he'd finish much faster than I could. I was seeing red by this point, but H just sighed, told Jake to come to the manager's office, and instructed me to return to the bakery. I didn't know what was happening. It wasn't until about an hour or so later that H came back to the bakery. He apologized for everything and said he'd fired Jake for product waste and insubordination. Apparently Jake had gotten quite mouthy with him during their talk. H acknowledged I still needed help and got that newer baker girl, whom I'll call Jay, to help me until he could hire a replacement. I don't think I'll ever understand what in God's green earth was going on with that little weirdo. I had some people comment that web designers and the like tend to view other jobs as somewhat lesser and simple, or something to that effect. My husband suggested he was merely arrogant and believed he could replace me, but why would he want to? It's not like he was aiming to be a baker or decorator, so why go through the trouble? I don't get it, and honestly I'm glad I don't have to think about it anymore. Jay is much better at the job than Jake was, and honestly much more steady-handed anyway. Sorry it's not more dramatic, just a standard idiot firing, but I'm glad it's over. Back to my peaceful cakes. Thanks so much for the advice, guys. I seriously appreciated all of it. Story 3. Few preliminary notes. 1. This happened about 5 years ago, so everything may not be fresh in my mind. 2. I am a tall girl, about 6 feet tall, and 99 times out of 100. I am more than happy to help someone because of my height if they ask politely. This is the one time someone wasn't. Cast of characters: me, Sally, my friend who actually works there, Karen, the Karen of this story, and manager, the manager of the store, turned out to be a pretty nice guy. On to the story. About 5 years ago, I was home from college and had run to the grocery store to pick up a few things for my mom for dinner that night. As I'm browsing the aisles, I can hear a lady clear her throat, and when I don't respond, she says in a rude tone, "Girl, can I get some help here?" Now, I admit, I could have said something different, but I don't react well to rudeness and people calling me girl. Since this seems to be popular here, let me tell you what I was wearing. Floral Hawaiian-style shirt, torn jeans, and white high-top Reeboks, so nothing like what a store employee wears. I just said, "Can you slap a please on that?" She didn't like that and stormed off. I just thought she went to go do it herself or find an employee to help, but I was wrong on that assumption. I continued shopping and ran into Sally, a former friend of mine from high school that I hadn't seen in a while. We were exchanging small talk. "How are you? What have you been up to?" That sort of stuff, when Karen came up the aisle with the manager in tow. She then stopped and told the manager, "That's the one who was rude to me. Discipline her." The manager called Sally over and began to lecture her on her behavior, when Karen yelled out, "Not her, the big girl." The manager looked at me, then at Karen and said, I thought you said it was an employee. She doesn't work here. Karen looked at him and then said, What do you mean? She doesn't work here? Well, kick her out of the store anyway. The manager turned to me and said, This lady says you were rude to her. Is this true? I said, No ruder than she was to me. If you're going to kick me out, kick her out as well. This elicited a gasp from Karen, who turned around and walked out of the aisle. The manager then told me, Karen is always a problem shopper here, but this is the first time she's complained about a customer and not an employee. What did you say to her? So I told him the story, to which he laughed. I then went and finished my shopping and never saw Karen again. Story 4. This happened when I was in my first year of high school, around late 2019 or so. Class ended early, and I was bored with nothing to do. So I went to my previous elementary school, since it only took me 5 minutes by walking to go there. I also missed the days I spent there, being nostalgic and all, so I thought it'd be fun. It was Saturday afternoon, around 1 p.m., so most kids had already gone home, leaving only the kids with extracurricular activities at the school. Some of the teachers recognized me, so I talked to them about how I've been and all, and asked one of them if I could go inside my old classroom since it seemed to be empty. The teacher allowed, kind of joked too by saying, What, you want to be an elementary schooler again? But reminded me that I needed to get out at 13:30 since an extracurricular activity is going to take place there. It was 13:20 when I asked, so I said okay and went inside the class. I spent the little time I had looking around, enamored at how despite the school being renovated in 2018, some of the stuff my old class had made or left is still in the classroom. I was reminiscing too much that I forgot about the time limit, and by the time I was looking at a Japanese calendar I made back then, it was just a normal calendar, but with Japanese celebration days below the dates and all. There were already 3 kids inside the class. One of them asked, Are you a substitute teacher? While the other 2 looked pretty scared. I turned around and walked to them with a calendar still in my hand. But before I even said anything, another kid said, Koinobori, while pointing at the background I used for the calendar. For context, koinobori are carp-shaped windsocks that are used to celebrate Children's Day in Japan, which happens on May 5th every year. Another kid quickly realized and said, So you are a teacher. I was still confused, but since they pointed out the koinobori background, I said, Oh, you're right, I'm surprised you know what koinobori is, which one of them replied, Of course, teacher name X taught us 2 weeks ago. And that's where it clicked for me. They were members of the Japanese club, and they thought I was another teacher since I was holding the Japanese calendar I made back when I was still a student there. I remember the Japanese club being made when I was about to graduate, so I didn't have a chance to join and didn't know much. But I know that my Japanese teacher back then was also the teacher for this club. We got along well, since I was a weeb. Yes, I was that annoying weeb who would end their sentence with desu or say stuff with broken Japanese to my friends. No, I'm a better weeb now and would always ask her about the language. I figured, since I still am learning Japanese regularly and I got along well with the teacher, where's the harm of entertaining these students? Honestly, even without me saying anything, the students were already telling me their names and told me about what the actual teacher taught the previous week. I learned that all 3 of them like anime as well, one even as much of a weeb as I was. Unfortunately, the teacher taught hiragana the previous week, one of the 3 Japanese writing systems, so I decided to turn my laptop on and played a Detective Conan opening without sound. See here, that Detective Conan opening video had the lyrics written in hiragana, with any kanji having hiragana letters on top of it too, at the bottom. So I told them to translate the hiragana to Romaji, Roman letters. They said okay, and they got to work. It went kind of well, frankly speaking. Since there were only 3 students, it wasn't difficult to control them. I would sit beside them, and they'll ask about a hiragana they didn't remember or didn't know of for about 15 minutes, until the teacher finally came inside the class. The actual teacher was confused. I don't think she even recognized me at the time she walked in. So she just asked, Wait, what? One of the kids quickly chimed in and said, Teacher, we've been studying with him. She looked at me for a moment, until a smile formed on her face. Finally recognizing me, we talked about the usual teacher-graduated student conversation topics until I explained what happened, which made her laugh for a bit. She then explained the situation to the students, which made them apologize to me for quickly assuming things and stuff. I told them it was fine, they smiled and went back to translate the Conan opening. I stayed up for the rest of the extracurricular activity, mostly talking to the students about the newest My Hero Academia episode until all three of them finished translating the opening. The students were sad to know that I won't be coming again. This honestly made me really happy, but the teacher calmed them down by saying, "I'm sure he will come again. He never has anything to do after all," which made them laugh. And yeah, that was the end. I don't have the teacher's contact, so I planned to visit them unannounced in early 2020. But the pandemic happened, and I don't know if I will ever have the chance to visit them again before I graduate from high school. I'm in my second year now. The cringe weeb, I'm sorry, but it has to be said. Student actually gave me his line ID, but I guess he deleted his account or something, since I don't see him on my contact list anymore. He used to message me about the anime he just watched or something about the language he didn't understand, which never fails to make me smile. But yeah, I'm unable to contact them nowadays, which is kind of sad. Story 5. A bit of backstory. My family is pretty small, consisting of just my parents, me, Guy, age 20, grandparents, on my mom's side, my uncle, who is a bear of a man, always keeps a stern look on his face and enjoys his drink, and has a pretty nifty whiskey collection, if you can call it that, including a very old bottle that my grandfather gave him before he died that he was always saying he was saving for a special occasion, probably little cousin's wedding. He isn't a drunk or anything though, so don't worry. Aunt and cousin, girl, age 18. Since we are a pretty small family and live relatively close to by, we're all very tight and go on vacations together all the time and get together multiple times every week. Me and little cousin, however, are exceptionally close, almost like brother and sister rather than cousins. We've always frequented the same schools and have played together ever since we were babies. This is something everyone knows, friends and family alike, as we are usually always together and hang out with the same group of people. It's also worth mentioning that I'm not a very confrontational kind of guy, and I don't think I have ever been in a fight my entire life. So this happened a few months ago, but it's still pretty fresh in my memory. Little cousin had just turned 18, so we had a party with the family to celebrate. A few days later, we decided to get together with some of our closest friends and go out for drinks. Legal age in my country is 18, so don't worry about that. We decide to go to a bar close to her house that I frequent with some friends. Now, since it's little cousin's first real night out and first time ever drinking, her father, despite being a man who enjoys his drink, made a point of not letting her touch alcohol until she was 18. I tell her not to drink too much since she's not used to it. We have some drinks and have some laughs and all around enjoy a good time in the company of friends. After some time I check my phone to see the time and notice it's already 2 a.m. So I turn to little cousin who's sitting next to me and tell her it's probably a good idea to head home, since this is her first time out, and we don't want to worry her parents. She agrees. We say goodbye to our friends and head out of the bar. Like I said before, the bar is pretty close to her house, 10-15 minutes walk, so we decided to walk instead of taking a bus. On the way, little cousin asks to sit down on a bench because she isn't feeling too well. We sit on the bench and I ask her how she's feeling. I can see there's no drunkenness involved here, since I saw what she drank, and it wasn't much, so she probably just has a belly ache since it's her first time drinking, and she isn't used to alcohol yet. We stay there for a while so she can rest and take some deep breaths. Enter the douchebag. As we're sitting on the bench, I see a guy walking in our direction. At first I don't think much of this, since he's probably just going to walk past and ignore us. Nope. He approaches and asks if little cousin is feeling okay, and I say she's just feeling sick from the drinks we had, and that we would be on our way soon enough. This guy proceeds to sit down, uncomfortably close to my cousin, puts his arm around her, and starts asking her all kinds of questions. Little cousin is visibly disturbed by this. Not only is her belly aching, now she has this random guy she doesn't know from anywhere getting too close to her and asking her all these questions. She gets up, comes to sit on the other side of the bench and snuggles up to me, leaving me in the middle of them now. The guy doesn't say a thing and just stands up and turns his back to us. Thinking he was about to leave, little cousin whispers to me that she's glad that's over, and I giggle a little. At this point, I don't know if the guy heard what we said or not, or if this was his plan all along. But when I lifted my face to look up at him, he is now turned back to us again with a knife in his hand, pointed at me. Little cousin just freezes, no screams or anything, but her eyes completely glued to the knife. This guy starts yelling, demanding we give him money. I tell him I don't have any money since we just came from drinking with friends. He keeps insisting I give him what money I have, and I keep telling him I have none. He then proceeds to point his knife at my cousin, now yelling even more, and with several profanities added to the mix, and saying what he would do to her if we didn't give him any money. Little cousin has tears rolling down her face at this point, and is shaking in fear. Now, like I said before, I'm not a very confrontational kind of guy, and I'm perfectly aware that if this happened, and I was with anybody else, I would have just given this guy my money, phone, everything. But this guy had the audacity to point a knife, and threaten to do things to my cousin, who is like a little sister to me. Someone I love to death, and who has been with me in the worst moments of my life and vice versa. Someone I would take a bullet for. When I see him pointing his knife at her, something inside me just snaps, and I get up as quickly as I can and rush for his arm. I manage to twist it behind his back in an attempt to have him drop the knife, but due to the adrenaline rush or just the anger I was feeling, I used too much strength, and an audible crack was heard. Don't get me wrong here, I don't feel any remorse from breaking this guy's arm, nor am I sorry for it. But I just wanted you to understand that I never intended to break his arm, just to get the knife. The guy collapses on the floor screaming in pain while clutching his arm. I immediately move for the knife and tell my cousin to call the cops. They arrive within 10-15 minutes and are greeted by a scene of a girl crying, a dude screaming in pain on the ground, and me still holding onto the knife. They yell for me to drop the knife, which I do, and then proceed to handcuff me. At this point, the adrenaline rush has left me, and thinking about the fact that I broke someone's arm, I can't really say anything back. My little cousin immediately intervenes, still in tears, and tells the two officers about what just happened. They check the guy, who is still screaming in pain at this point, saying that I attacked him. The officers immediately notice that he meets the description of a man reported for a stabbing a few days prior to this event. They uncuff me, and little cousin grabs me and starts crying on my shoulder. They call an ambulance for the guy since he very clearly has a broken arm, and then proceed to properly take our statements. The ambulance arrives while we're still talking to the two officers. Little cousin has stopped crying now, but is still clearly shaken up and hasn't let go of me. They tell me how lucky I was I didn't get stabbed for trying to fight the guy. In hindsight, as I'm writing this, I have to agree with them. It was a very dumb move, and I could have ended up stabbed, or worse, my little cousin could have been stabbed too. And that next time I should just give my wallet. The paramedics put the guy in the ambulance and take him to a hospital. The officers tell me not to worry too much, since I acted in self-defense, and that he is most likely going to jail, but that me and my cousin will probably have to go to court to testify. After making sure we're okay one last time, they ask if we need them to take us home, but since little cousin's house is close by, I tell them there's no need, and they leave after the ambulance. Me and little cousin start running and don't stop until we reach her house. Her parents are already asleep at this point, and since we don't want to wake them up and worry them, I tell her she should go to bed, but that she should tell them about it first thing in the morning. She agrees, and after talking about what had just happened to us for a while, I take my leave. After making sure she locks the door properly, get in my car and drive. When I get home, my parents are still up waiting for me and ask me how the night was. I retell everything that had just happened as they listen in utter disbelief and in a state of panic, asking if little cousin is okay, and if I'm okay. I tell them everything is fine, and they calm down a bit. They ask if my uncle already knew. I say he doesn't since he and my aunt were already asleep when we got to their house. As they are talking between each other trying to process what I had just told them, I start to cry. My parents start panicking up again, asking if I was okay, and telling me that I'm safe now. I tell them I'm not crying because I'm hurt or because I'm afraid. I'm crying because I'm so angry and frustrated, thinking about what that guy could have done to little cousin. They tell me everything's okay now, and that I should probably head to bed and not think about it, but that we would go over to little cousin's house in the morning to make sure everything is okay. I agree and head to bed. The next morning, as we're getting ready to leave, my father gets a call from his brother, my uncle, little cousin's father, telling him to go over to his house and to take me with him. Before turning off the call, my father tells me I'm probably in trouble and that I should start mentally preparing myself for a yelling. We go over to little cousin's house, and before getting out of the car, my parents insist that I go in front, and that I should have a good talk with my uncle and my aunt. As I'm going up the stairs to the porch, the front door opens and little cousin comes flying at me with a huge smile on her face and hugs me. I ask her if she's okay, to which she says yes. Then, with a very serious face, she tells me my uncle wants to have a talk with me. I gulp down, preparing myself for the worst, and we head inside. My uncle is in the living room sitting on the sofa. When he sees me, he immediately stands up. Now, like I said, remember that this guy is a hulking bear of man, way taller than I am. I close my eyes and grit my teeth, as anybody would when they're expecting to receive a slap that's capable of propelling them to space. The next moment my uncle is hugging me, bawling his eyes out, thanking me for protecting his little girl, and saying that I let the guy go easy with just a broken arm. I can't even speak at this point because I was expecting to get a beating, but I'm now in disbelief, seeing my uncle cry, something I never witnessed before. My father is standing behind me in shock as well, since he himself doesn't remember seeing his brother cry, apart from when they were kids. All the while little cousin is laughing so hard, because she knows I was about to crap my pants. Soon enough aunt also comes over and hugs me and thanks me for what I did. My uncle tells me not worry about a thing, and says that he will do whatever he takes so get that guy in jail. Story 6. Hi everyone. I know it's been a while since I first wrote here, but I think you should all know something came up. There was an entire campaign from my family to let it go and reminded me that I had one father. My father even reached out, hoping to talk some more, and after several weeks of therapy discussing this, I think I have a solution. He wants to get back in my life, that's fine. However, I am leaving conditions. I showed my sister and my brother these conditions, and my sister kept it professional, saying that she would look into it. My brother, on the other hand, thought I'm going to extreme, and that this is an impossible list for him to honor. I don't want it to be easy. I want to know that he can actually respect boundaries. Some of you might think similarly to my brother. Some of you might suggest, like before, to cut him off. But I want to know if this is too extreme. Mediation statement. Background. My father has spent years exerting control over my life in ways that were selfish, damaging, and entirely unjustifiable. He dictated my academic path, interfered with my career choices, and dismissed my goals in favor of what he wanted, usually to save himself money or maintain control. These choices sabotaged my academic record, limited my opportunities, and caused long-term harm. He did this knowingly and without regard for the consequences to me. He also controlled where I worked, even when better opportunities were available. I was put in a position where I had to tell people I wasn't allowed to pursue other jobs. That dynamic made me feel weak, subordinate, and trapped. No parent should ever put their child in that position. There were further boundary violations, including using my brother to access my private academic records and coerce me into printing them out for him, illegally. That is not a mistake. That is manipulation. All of this has created one unshakable truth. I do not trust him. He has earned that distrust through consistent patterns of self-serving, dismissive, and controlling behavior. Now he wants to come back into my life. If that is to happen, it will be under strict and immovable conditions. I am not returning to a dynamic where my voice is buried and my choices overridden. That era of my life is permanently over. Non-negotiable boundaries. When I say stop, you stop. If I end a conversation, shut down a topic, or tell you to back off, that is the end of it. There is no arguing, no lecturing, no pushing. You do not get to bulldoze me anymore. Absolutely no unsolicited advice. If I want your opinion, I will ask for it. Otherwise, keep it to yourself. You lost the privilege of directing my life a long time ago. No criticism unless you are the one fixing the problem. If you think something in my home needs work, then you can volunteer to handle it. If you're not stepping up, you don't get to speak on it. Complaints without action are not welcome. You do not have automatic access to me or my home. There is no open invitation. You come over only when I invite you, and only on my terms. No surprise visits. No inserting yourself where you're not wanted. You need therapy. Your patterns controlling behavior, manipulation, emotional disregard are harmful. If you want any place in my life moving forward, you must work with a therapist to address these issues. This is a condition, not a suggestion. You need to accept your role in the damage you caused. You are the bad guy in my story because of your actions. Not because I want it that way, not because I'm rewriting history, but because you earned that position. Acknowledging that is your responsibility if you want any chance at rebuilding trust. This is your final chance. If you violate these boundaries even once, I'm done. There will be no warnings, no second chances, and no discussions. You step out of line, I walk away permanently. Why these boundaries exist? These boundaries are here because your history has proven that without clear and enforced limits, you will overstep, manipulate, control, and damage. I refuse to repeat the past. I am not the child you could push around anymore. If you want a relationship going forward, this is the only way it happens. If you can't handle that, then we part ways here. I know some of you might think this is crazy, but believe me, I would not even throw these up there unless I can't trust him. Let me know what you think. Am taking this too far? Ada for wanting to keep him at arm's length. Am I being unreasonable?